Welcome to Untold Facts. Today we're diving into a really big shift in American foreign policy. I mean, it's a move that has everyone, allies and rivals alike, scratching their heads and asking, what in the world happens when a superpower decides it kind of wants to be alone? So yeah, let's get into it.
You know, the legendary diplomat Henry Kissinger, he had this image of himself as a lone cowboy, right? The guy who rides into town, sorts everything out all by himself. But here's the thing. For all that swagger, Kissinger knew a fundamental truth. He knew that even the toughest Lone Ranger, well, he needs some friends. You can't do it all on your own forever.
And that really gets to the heart of what we're talking about today. In our world, which is just so interconnected, with complex threats, global economies, can any nation, even a superpower, really afford to just stand alone? It's a huge question, and it pretty much turns decades of foreign policy on its head.
So, what we're seeing right now, it's a real historical puzzle. Seriously, the historian Margaret Macmillan points out that, look, alliances form and they break up all the time. That's just history. But for a major power to so casually, almost brutally, just toss aside its own dependable long-term partners, that's something you almost never see. It's truly unprecedented.
Okay, so before we get any deeper, let's get our terms straight, because it's important. You hear isolationism thrown around a lot. In its purest sense, that means a total retreat from the world. But what we're really talking about here is something a little different: non-interventionism. That's more like, hey, let's avoid foreign conflicts and alliances, but we'll still trade and talk. It's a subtle difference for sure, but a really crucial one.
So what's behind this massive shift? Well, one really compelling idea is that it's a psychological thing. The whole mindset has changed. It's gone from seeing the US as the victor, the architect of the whole post-war system, to seeing the US as a victim that's being taken advantage of by that exact same system. And when you have that victimhood mindset, suddenly your allies start to look like freeloaders, just taking you for a ride. And believe me, this isn't just talk. This whole mindset has led to some pretty fundamental changes in what's being said and what's being done. It's actively chipping away at the very foundation of that alliance system the US built after World War II. I mean, just look at the language being used. The difference is, it's jarring. On one side, you have democratic allies, we're talking everyone from Japan to Canada, getting called things like freeloaders, cheats, and spoiled. But then on the other side, you see autocratic leaders getting all this praise, being called a very great leader or a genius. Imagine how confusing that message is for the rest of the world.
But actions speak louder than words. And the actions here have gone way further, just eroding decades of trust. I'm talking about hitting close allies with punitive tariffs, publicly questioning core security guarantees like NATO, and even a vote at the UN where the US actually sided with Russia against its own democratic partners over Ukraine. I mean, these are moves that just a few years ago would have been completely unthinkable.
So, you might be wondering, is this whole impulse something totally new? And the answer is, not really. I mean, the style is definitely unique, but the core idea of America first, of avoiding getting tangled up in foreign problems, that's a really powerful theme that pops up again and again in American history. It goes all the way back to the very beginning.
Yeah, this idea has really ebbed and flowed over the years. You go back to 1796, and you've got George Washington himself warning against entangling alliances. Then you jump forward to the 1940s, and there's the America First Committee, arguing hard to stay out of World War II. It was really the Cold War that changed things and kicked off decades of international cooperation with groups like NATO. But it looks like that old non-interventionist feeling is coming back, and it's coming back strong. And you can see this shift so clearly in public opinion. It's actually pretty dramatic. Polls from Pew show that way back in 1962, only about 20% of Americans thought the country should just mind its own business internationally. Fast forward to today, and that number is over 50%. That's a huge jump. It's clear that after years of foreign wars and economic stress, the public mood has shifted, and you better believe politicians are noticing. Of course, a shift this big doesn't happen in a vacuum. The entire world is watching this play out, and frankly, they're scrambling. Everyone, from allies to adversaries, is having to rethink their entire strategy for a world where America's role just isn't a sure thing anymore. So, with all this uncertainty, what are allies doing? Well, they're basically being forced to take matters into their own hands. You've got France and the UK teaming up on a new pact for nuclear deterrence in Europe. And then you have countries like South Korea and Japan, who have been under the US nuclear umbrella for ages. Now they're openly talking about getting their own nuclear weapons. That is a seriously destabilizing thought.
And the damage here, it's not just about diplomacy. It's getting institutional, it's getting economic. There was this great analysis about the US-Canada relationship that put it perfectly. The loss of trust is now a business risk. Think about it. If tariffs can just be slapped on out of nowhere, businesses are going to look for more predictable partners. If you can't trust your biggest trading partner, you find another one. It's that simple.
You know the old saying, nature abhors vacuum? Well, the same is true for geopolitics. As the US steps back, China isn't just sitting on the sidelines watching. Oh no. It is actively and strategically moving in to fill that void. The US disengages from places like the World Bank or the IMF, and China is right there, positioning itself to rewrite the rules of global trade and finance to its own advantage.
So to really get a sense of the potential long-term price of all this, history actually gives us a pretty powerful warning. Let's take a look at another global superpower that, once upon a time, found itself in a very dangerous, very lonely position.
Okay, picture this. It's the late 1800s. The British Empire is absolutely massive, the biggest the world had ever seen, but it was in trouble. It was suffering from what the historian Paul Kennedy famously called imperial overstretch. It had rivals everywhere, its military and economy were stretched thin, and a lot of the world was frankly sick of its dominance. Their so-called splendid isolation was starting to look more like a splendid vulnerability. So what did Britain do? Did they double down? Nope. They pivoted, and they did it fast. First, they looked around and realized just how costly their isolation had become. Second, they started making friends, forming alliances with old rivals like France and Japan. And by doing that, by sharing the load, they eased that military and economic strain and actually extended their global influence for decades to come. The lesson couldn't be clearer. Working together, not going it alone, was the only way to survive.
And all of that brings us right back to where we started. The British learned the hard way that splendid isolation wasn't so splendid after all. So in our world today, which is more connected than ever before, with all kinds of new challenges and rising powers, what is the real cost of pushing away trusted friends and, well, making America alone again? It's a question worth thinking about.